Hello, everybody. How's it going? Welcome into an instant recap. That's Ashley Wenskoski. I'm Samantha Croston. We have Rachel Culver on the producer mic, and we are sticking up with you to do this. It is a crisp 12:21 in the morning, and Syracuse just lost to Stanford 26-24 in a stunner that I don't think anybody expected. Ashley was shooting. Rachel was in the press box. I was back here at the station. What did you see?
I mean, look, to call it anything other than stunning, I think would be a miss. I mean, Syracuse was heavily favored in this game. We had our predictions coming into this game. The whole world expected them to win this game. It's a tough loss. It's a wake-up call. It's a gut check for Fran Brown in his first year as head coach and this team under a first-year coaching staff. It was just too little too late. We saw the defense all night kind of bend but not break. They broke when it mattered the most with 30 seconds left on the clock. I believe it was 4th and 9, allowing Stanford to get into field goal range and ultimately kick the field goal that did lose the game. It was a brutal loss. At the same time, it was the exact type of loss that I think you see from a team coming off a bye week. Now, Stanford also coming off of a bye week. That is by no means any excuse, but they looked sluggish. They never woke up in this game on either side of the ball. I think it was interesting in this game to see the offense kind of sputter and struggle a little bit, and the defense was tasked with picking up the offense, and ultimately they couldn't do it.
It was Stanford kicker Emmett Kenny who kicked that field goal as the clock expired. There was even a false start, so he had to back up 5 yards. It didn't matter at all. That football went right down the middle. There was never a doubt. A couple things that stick out to me, just to kind of start here. As far as rushing yards, just as a team, Stanford hit 173. Syracuse was at 26. Was anyone wondering why Syracuse just did not participate in the run game at all?
They had no run game whatsoever. LaQuint Allen was unable to find any lane of any kind. They were without kind of running back two at this point. Will Nixon was on the sidelines in sweats. He did not dress for this game, so they were relying on Yasin Willis for some yardage. But it's tough. It's been a tough first 3 games, honestly, for LaQuint Allen in this run game. They just haven't really been able to get that run game going, I think, to the extent that they'd like it to. They've been a little bit of a one-dimensional offense, and you saw the dangers of that tonight.
Emmanuel Ross, wide receiver, also out. You also had Dion Tank Wilson, D lineman, out. Was any information given out about that tonight as to what they are all out for and how long they'll be out for? I just figured I'd ask that.
I was not in the press conference for that portion. I was outside, so I'm sure that updates were. Rachel, did you hear anything?
Yes. From what it sounded like, it was Tank had an injury that had been lingering for about a week, so they were nurturing that. I'm not sure the extent of that injury. And when it comes to the other one, I forget completely what Fran said. So we'll have to dip back into the press conference for that.
And Tank was a big loss for this defense. He was the highest graded run defender in Syracuse's defense in the absence of Marlowe Wax. So a big loss. They also lost corner Marcellus Barnes, I believe in the first quarter, early in this game to injury.
And that was scary. Honestly, really scary play. So hoping he's okay. But yes, to your point, Allen, 27 yards on the night on 8 attempts. It was definitely the kind of thing where they were throwing this ball through the air. And you can see that in the numbers. Passing yards, Syracuse had 339. Stanford had 178. It wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It just was something that even the announcers, broadcasters were, I think, a little confused by. Another number that I wanted to discuss, penalties. 7 penalties that cost them 70 yards. It felt like more.
Penalties surely have to be cleaned up. We know the D in DART stands for discipline, and I just know that Fran Brown is somewhere right now unhappy with the discipline that this team showed tonight. They were costly. You can argue about the refs and whatever, and I know that fans in the Dome were not happy with numerous of those calls, but it is what it is. The penalties have got to be cleaned up. I believe it was 6 last week, 7 this week. They just have to improve because they were costly tonight.
I want to work back a little bit here. The field goal happens. That's ultimately what loses the game. But prior to that, we see a situation where Alec Eilmanor catches the ball downfield, which ultimately puts Stanford in a position to be able to kick that field goal. This is something they were talking about on the broadcast, and I was just wondering what you guys thought about this. The announcers were saying that they thought that There should have been more help on Io Manor, that they should have been in a different coverage and they weren't. And actually, I guess I'll call it an announcer jinx, but maybe it's just the announcer essentially being smart. He legitimately pointed out Io Manor, said, this is who I would go to if I was the quarterback. And it's exactly what happened. Did he talk about that at all? Take any accountability? Rachel, Ashley, either of you? Or what'd you think, even?
I mean, it was Clarence Lewis on the coverage. It was obviously, it lost them the game, right? To convert on 4th and 9 there. That's what put them in field goal range. At the same time, Clarence Lewis, in my opinion, and I think statistics reflect this, has been one of their best corners, one of their best defensive backs. We saw him with the interception earlier in the game.
Yep.
It was just a tough situation of should have been double coverage on that Stanford
Io Manor
on that guy. I mean, he should not have been out there alone.
That was a conversation we were having, like, on the ride home, from ride home. I don't live here. I do not live here, but it feels like it sometimes. Right. On the ride back to the station, we were having that conversation. That was why all game did we not see that happening, regardless of that last play. That kind of felt like something that should have been addressed earlier.
And I'm not saying clearly that was not the only reason. You also look back even further and just look at this this theme in general. There were some miscommunications tonight. I mean, several times where the receivers who were catching Kyle's passes either did not know that the ball was even coming to them in the instance of Dan Villari that led to a pick six. But there were also other plays where I just felt that either the receiver or McCord were confused about the route. It was uncharacteristic compared to what we have seen in the past 2 games before this.
That's exactly the word, miscommunication. You just felt like, and you expected when Syracuse was receiving to start the second half, that's at least when I expected the offense to get firing on all cylinders. You just never saw it happen. You never saw McCord get on the same page. He was throwing the ball a lot to Umari Hatcher in the first half. Obviously, Hatcher with the touchdown. He wasn't really able to make those type of game-changing plays with Arondé Gadsden. He wasn't looking for him up over the middle. He couldn't find him, and he didn't. Trevor Pena, had a couple catches, but was not the level of dominance that we saw from Pena and Gadsden in the first 2 wins. It just is what it is. The pick six, like you mentioned, McCord had 2 interceptions tonight. In my opinion, the second one I'll put on him. The first one I will not. You can say what you want. Dan Villari didn't even turn around on that play. So, I mean, it's tough when you're throwing the ball to essentially a wide open member of the other team.
Correct. And that's where, like, I want to know more information. Like, whose fault was that? Why didn't he turn around? Why did McCord think he was going to turn around?
Right.
Again, it goes back to that idea of miscommunication. And McCord himself definitely just some uncharacteristic plays tonight. He was 27 for 42 with 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, threw for 339 total yards. When I say he wasn't playing like himself, I mean that both positively and negatively. I mean, that rushing TD, he was looking like Josh Allen out there. He was putting his body on the line. He was diving. He was making some great plays. He actually really was playing like Josh Allen tonight, actually.
Yeah.
He was making great plays and then simultaneously turning around and doing something that makes you just...
Yeah. The rushing touchdown, the first one of his collegiate career, I think fans were happy to see that. It got some momentum going at the time. It also told me at the time, like we've been saying, he just wasn't clicking with the offense. For him to feel as though he had to do that in that situation, even attempt it, was shocking, to say the least. I just do not feel like he felt at any point in this game comfortable with the connection that he had with any of the receivers. Even Hatcher, who we saw him turn to for a lot of targets in this game. There was some drop balls, there were some routes you felt like just they weren't on the same page. Pena's been that safety net. He didn't have him. I mean, he had a few catches, but he didn't have him as that blatant open target that he's been used to having. It's tough. They were without Yazid Haynes, not due to injury. Yazid Haynes just was not there tonight due to personal reasons. They did clarify that it was not disciplinary. He just was he was not with the team.
Family matter.
Jackson Meeks we saw get in for the touchdown, which was good, but McCord has had a wealth of weapons throughout the first 2 games, and he didn't have that tonight. He had to make something happen on his own.
I did think it was interesting because he made comments on that in the post-game presser. Someone asked him about, like, is this a side of you that you're hoping to tap more into? Is this something we're excited about? Like, can we expect more of the run game from you? Basically was the question. And his answer I thought was interesting because he was like, I'll do whatever it takes to help my team win. But you could, like, sense that there was some, like, reservation in him saying that. Like, I don't think that's where he feels most comfortable, and I don't think that's how he wants what he wants to rely on in his game at all. So just having to see him do that when we do know him to be kind of a pocket passer guy, I think it speaks volumes to kind of the issues that they were facing tonight.
It's a great card to be able to whip out of the deck when you need it, right? Like tonight, it did help in that situation. It bought them a lot of momentum. But like I said, if Kyle McCord's doing that, something's wrong in the first place with the entire offense.
I actually completely agree. Like, it doesn't seem like him. That's not where you can tell that he feels most naturally comfortable. Cool to see. Nice to know that he has that in them. But that should not be. It almost seemed like he did that out of necessity tonight.
Yes.
Fine, I'll do it myself because there is truthfully no other option.
Yes.
Rachel, were you in the press conference the whole time?
Yeah.
Anything else stick out to you?
I think the big thing that stuck out to me in terms of what Fran had to say is, like, basically Fran said this game entirely boiled down to physicality, which all of the players who followed after him and took the podium after him agreed with. I think, again, like Mungro's been kind of harping on for weeks now, the tackling was an issue. I think there's kind of been a whole issue of where's Justin Barron. Like, there's just a couple things on defense, and like physicality wise, they were outplayed, and there was just athleticism that Stanford was bringing to the table that we didn't see reflected. And yes, we can lean on the bye week for that, but also Stanford just came off that bye week too. I don't know if it's a situation where you're coming into kind of enemy territory and there's a whole other reason that you're feeling a little bit sparked up and excited about making those big plays and I guess forcing that contact, but Fran Brown was harping on the physicality, and I don't know what you saw on the broadcast, but I would assume that's reflected there too.
It was just simply too little too late, right? They took the lead for the first time in this game with just over 3 minutes to go. They make it 24-23. At that point, you're desperately hoping that they can hold on through those 3 minutes. The defense almost looked like they could and then couldn't at the last minute. It was just too little, too late. It was just it was a game of what ifs and a game of, I think, missed opportunity. I think more than anything, you have to look at this game. This was one of those college football games, and these come up every now and again, that you feel Syracuse lost more than Stanford won. Sure, Stanford won the game, but you feel like Stanford lost, or you feel like Syracuse lost it for themselves.
It's so funny you say that. I was like almost feeling like you were gonna beat me to it, and I was like bummed out. I was gonna say what I was gonna say, like my version of that I was really thinking when I was here was like, if Syracuse loses this game, they did not lose it to Stanford.
No,
like they lost it to themselves.
Syracuse lost to Syracuse.
Syracuse lost to Syracuse. It's the same concept. I really did feel that way. Like even when they took the lead. And there was only like 3 minutes. Like 3 minutes, right?
3 minutes.
Even then, I really didn't feel confident that they were going to win. And more than that, I didn't feel like they deserved to win. I felt like if they got out of there with a win, it would have been really, really lucky.
If they escaped with a 24-23 win, obviously you're happy, but it was an escape. It wasn't a survival. It was not their best version of football, no matter what, even if they did walk away with a win in that game. And I will tell you, their kicker, Emmett Kenny, I believe that's how you say his name, I knew the minute that they got into field goal range, that guy kicked a 51-yard field goal earlier in the game. You could not let them get close, and they got too
even
close.
with the penalties.
Even with the penalties.
Ice cold.
Credit where credit is due.
Yeah. I mean, he was money all game.
Yeah.
Anyone have any final thoughts or takeaways before we wrap it up and get out of here?
It's a gut check. I think there's been a lot of hype around this team. There's been a lot of, I think us included, saying we're just going to coast to 4-0 through these first 4 games. Or maybe Georgia Tech, but then after we got past Georgia Tech, all right, that's an undeniable 4-0 start. It's not. It is what it is. This is the chance for this team, I think, to really pick themselves up. Now, if you're Syracuse, you're very lucky in the fact that you have Holy Cross coming here next week because that is the epitome of a get-right game, and you can use it to your advantage to try to get this run game going, to try to get Kyle McCord with whatever he's not comfortable with these receivers, to get the defense better tackling. It is exactly what the doctor ordered for this team right now is Holy Cross coming to the Dome next Saturday. So I'll just say that.
Prescribe you with a get-right game.
One thing I'll add just kind of to top it off here, but as like the kicker was lining up for that kick at the end of the game, I was kind of looking around in the crowd, and normally at that time in a game in a Syracuse, I've been to a lot of Syracuse games, everybody's worried about parking, everybody's worried about getting out of the Dome. I will say, like, even when it felt pretty sure that, like, okay, this kick is going to go in, like, people were sat, people were in the stadium, people were loud, like, nobody was, like, on their way out. So I think that is a good reflection of, like, Fran's whole thing this week where we've talked about, like, he has to earn that and this team has to earn that. I think they're well on their way to doing it, and I hope I don't think this loss is going to work against that in any way. I think people are bought in, and I think that's exciting.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the crowd as well. That's a great point. People stayed. The student section left a little bit. I mean, it's a Friday night. What are you going to do with the student section? But the crowd stayed. The crowd was into it. The crowd was willing them to a stop on 3rd down and then on 4th down. That ultimately didn't happen. But it's like you said, it's the buy-in. Fran Brown and then the team went over there and stood for the alma mater in front of the student section, as miserable as they were moments after that loss. Fran Brown is going to win with you and he's going to lose with you with this fan base. So to me, that was just, I guess, a good sign of what's to come. And Kyle McCord talked about it post-game. Like, this is not season defining, right?
No.
It's their 3rd game of the season. They can absolutely, as Kyle McCord said in the post-game press conference, achieve everything that they've wanted to this year. But it's a gut check. And it's a little bit of how are you going to respond to this?
They're not going to start the season 4-0.
They're not.
And what's going to happen beyond this remains to be seen. But to your point, it's a gut check. Now it's a matter of seeing how they rebound after Fran Brown's first loss with this program. Thanks so much, everybody, for sticking with us. We'll see you next time on the Orange Zone Podcast.